17,000 islands, the fourth most populous nation on the planet, an archipelago that controls the arteries of world shipping, and yet it's a country most people know less about than Luxembourg. But behind the scenes of global politics, a real battle for this power is unfolding. Washington and Beijing are investing billions, sending diplomats and building military bases, all for one goal: winning the favor of a state that could redraw the map of influence in the 21st century. Recently, an event occurred here that made democratic capitals around the world nervous. The new president, a former general with a controversial past, brought his own son into power. A dynasty is forming before our eyes in a gigantic country with a population larger than Brazil. What is it about this tropical nation that makes superpowers set aside their pride and literally line up for its attention? And why is the democratic world suddenly starting to sound the alarm?
Imagine your bank account growing tenfold in 20 years. This fantasy is a reality in Indonesia. Since 1998, this island nation's economy has demonstrated growth that would be the envy of European capitals. These aren't just figures in reports. We're talking about a fundamental transformation of the entire economic model. In the early 2000s, the country was a typical supplier of raw materials, shipping copper to Shanghai, bauxite to Tokyo, and coal to Mumbai. Today, it has become an industrial giant. The secret to this success lies in a revolutionary shift. President Joko Widodo made a decision many considered economic suicide. He completely banned the export of unprocessed nickel. Western experts predicted collapse. Instead, a miracle happened. The result exceeded the wildest expectations. Nickel smelting capacity increased from 16 million tons to 100 million in just 5 years. Today, Indonesia smelts more nickel than the rest of the world combined. The country has seized a key position in the production of batteries for electric vehicles, the industry of the future. But metallurgy is just the tip of the iceberg. The digital revolution has transformed the archipelago into a tech mecca for Southeast Asia, boasting 15 unicorn companies, each valued at over $1 billion. Its e-commerce market is 6 times larger than the Philippines. Simultaneously, the government is playing a very astute game with foreign investors. On one hand, the doors are open to everyone. On the other, Jakarta dictates the terms. Do you want to extract our resources? Build factories here. Do you want to sell to our consumers? Create jobs for our citizens. This policy of mandated investment is working. Companies agree because few alternatives exist, and Indonesia gains not only capital, but also technology and knowledge.
However, economic achievements are not everything. Geography matters as much as balance sheet figures. Have you ever wondered where the planet's main trade arteries are located? Here's a simple fact few people realize. 60% of seaborne cargo, from Chinese goods to Middle Eastern oil, crosses the waters of one state: Indonesia. The Strait of Malacca, the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Passage. These geographical points might sound mundane in a textbook, but in reality, they determine whether the world receives energy resources and consumer goods. Block these choke points, and global trade grinds to a standstill. Unlike other trade corridors, there's no possibility of building a bypass road here, only narrow straits between the islands. Hundreds of tankers, container ships, and bulk carriers pass through Indonesian waters every day. Oil from the Persian Gulf to Japan, electronics from China to Europe, agricultural products from Australia to Asia. All these streams converge at one point. Control over these waterways means control over global trade, and not only trade. Internet cables connecting continents also pass through these same straits. Cut them off, and half the world will be cut off from communication. America's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy is built on partnerships with Japan, India, and Australia. But without Indonesia, this structure resembles the table on three unstable legs. Add a fourth pillar in the form of Jakarta, and the entire security architecture of the region changes radically. China's Belt and Road Initiative also extends into Indonesian territory, with projects like the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway costing $7 billion, industrial parks, and port modernization. Beijing invests not out of altruism, but because it understands the strategic value of its partner. But there's another geographical factor that makes Indonesia unique. The country is located at the junction of two oceans, the Pacific and the Indian. This means any warships moving between Asia and the Middle East must pass by Indonesian coast. Here an intriguing question arises. How does a country small by military standards manage to engage with two giants simultaneously and avoid becoming a victim of their rivalry?
Indonesia practices a policy that seems impossible in today's polarized world. She is friends with everyone and belongs to no one. This strategy is called non-alignment, and its roots trace back to 1955, when leaders of third-world countries gathered in Bandung. At that time, it was an attempt to find an alternative to choosing between capitalism and communism. Today, it's a way to extract maximum benefit from the US-China confrontation. Consider the practical results of this policy. Jakarta sells nickel to China, providing its automotive industry with critical raw materials. At the same time, it buys F-16 fighter jets from the Americans, strengthening its defense capabilities. It conducts joint military exercises with U.S. forces as part of the Garuda Shield program, but purchases missile systems from Russian and European suppliers. Trade with Beijing is worth $130 billion annually, almost twice as much as under the previous president. Yet when China tried to discuss maritime boundaries near the Natuna Islands, it received a harsh refusal. Moreover, Indonesia conducted military exercises in the disputed waters, clearly showing its red lines. This approach requires virtuoso skill. One wrong move, and the country could find itself under pressure from both sides. Get too close to Washington, and you'll lose Chinese investments. Get too fond of Beijing, and you'll lose American technology and military aid. But for now, Jakarta has managed to benefit from superpower rivalry. The United States provides preferential access to its market for 3,500 Indonesian goods. China finances infrastructure megaprojects. Europe buys palm oil and shares green technologies. Japan invests in the automotive industry. All this diplomatic acrobatics is made possible by one simple principle. Indonesia does not allow any one country to become a dominant supplier or buyer. Diversification is the basis for its independence. However, such a policy carries risks. The world is becoming increasingly polarized, and America and China are increasingly demanding certainty from their partners. Who is not with us is against us. Yet geopolitical games require more than just diplomatic dexterity. They also demand real power. Indonesia has something to show here, too. While the world watches high-profile conflicts in hotspots, Indonesia is methodically building up its defense capabilities. The military budget increased by 20% last year. 33 modern fighter jets and 103 Leopard 2 tanks were purchased from Germany. Scorpion tanks were received from the British, and transport aircraft and attack helicopters from the Americans. This strategy is called supplier diversification. No one should gain leverage through arms contracts. Yes, servicing different types of equipment is more expensive, but at least independence is preserved. If one supplier tries to blackmail with an embargo, there are alternatives. 400,000 troops make the Indonesian army one of the largest in the region.
But it's not just about quantity. In recent years, emphasis has been placed on high-quality modernization. New air defense systems, modern ships, and drones. The development of the naval forces is especially interesting. A country of 17,000 islands simply must have a powerful navy. Construction of new frigates, submarines, and patrol ships is in full swing. The goal is to transform the Indonesian Navy into a serious regional force. The geographical location makes these military investments a serious factor in regional security. Control over key straits means the ability to influence the movement of warships of any country. This is especially true for the South China Sea, the hottest spot of modern geopolitics. Although Indonesia does not formally lay claim to the disputed Spratly Highlands, it reacts harshly to attempt to limit its sovereignty in its own waters. The 2020 Natuna Islands military exercises sent a clear message to Chinese maritime patrols. Territorial integrity is a red line that should not be crossed. Since then, incidents in this water area have ceased. But the most interesting thing is the Defense Industry Development Program. Indonesia does not want to be forever dependent on arms imports. Joint drone production projects with Turkey, with South Korea on the construction of fifth-generation fighters, and with France on the creation of submarines are underway. The goal is ambitious, to produce half of the necessary weapons domestically by 2030. It's still a long way off, but the trend is clear. Indonesia plans to become not only a consumer, but also a producer of weapons.
There is another crucial component to Indonesia's success that is often overlooked by analysts. 277 million people is not just a large population. It is a young, vibrant society where the average age is significantly lower than in developed countries. As Japan and South Korea age and face labor shortages, Indonesia is experiencing a demographic boom. An economy where millions of young, ambitious workers enter the job market every year, where there are still few pensioners but a surplus of taxpayers, and where domestic consumption grows naturally simply because there are more people and incomes are increasing, a young workforce means economic growth for decades to come. Experts predict that the demographic bonus will continue to benefit Indonesia until at least 2050. This represents a whole generation of advantages over aging competitors. A growing middle class creates a domestic market that is not dependent on external shocks. Today, GDP per capita is already twice that of India, whereas just 20 years ago, the countries were at about the same level. This demographic bonus makes Indonesia an investment magnet. Companies see not only affordable labor, but also a huge consumer market of the future. The world's fourth largest nation will inevitably become one of the planet's largest economies. But there is a nuance. The demographic dividend is not an automatic guarantee of success. We need to create jobs for all these young people, provide them with education, healthcare, and housing. Otherwise, the demographic bonus will turn into a demographic catastrophe. So far, Indonesia is coping. Youth unemployment is declining, and the level of education is rising. But serious challenges lie ahead, especially in the context of another megatrend, a tourism revolution that is changing the face of the country. What's happening with Indonesian tourism now is not just a fashionable hobby, it's a strategic restructuring of the entire industry. After the pandemic, the government made a radical decision: no mass tourism like in Thailand. Instead, the focus is on quality tourists, willing to spend more and leave a smaller environmental footprint. The result is the introduction of a tourist tax, tightening of rules of conduct in Bali, and restrictions for low-budget tours. This sounds like a way to nip an industry in the bud. Vice versa, tourism revenues are growing faster than the number of visitors. The logic is simple. It's better to accommodate 1 million tourists, each of whom will spend $2,000, than 2 million backpackers with a budget of $300. Less load on infrastructure, more profit, higher quality of service.
This model of selective tourism could become a blueprint for other developing countries. Instead of a race for quantity, focus on quality and sustainability. In June 2025, Indonesia announced the easing of import restrictions, a move many perceived as preparation for a trade war with the new Trump administration. The calculation is simple: show a willingness to compromise before engaging in tough negotiations. This is preventative diplomacy, another manifestation of Jakarta's pragmatic approach to international relations. It is better to make concessions voluntarily than to have them imposed by ultimatum. At the same time, the country continues to protect key industries. The ban on the export of crude nickel remains in force, and requirements for localization of production have not been canceled. Liberalization, yes, but selective and controlled. How long do you think Indonesia will be able to balance between the US and China? Write your thoughts in the comments. However, there is a dark side to Indonesia's success, which causes serious concern among the international community. October 2024 marked a turning point in Indonesia's modern history. Prabowo Subianto, a former general with a controversial past, came to power. The outgoing president Joko Widodo, aiming for continuity, appointed his 36-year-old son, Gibran Rakabuming Raka, as his vice president. Formally, everything went according to the law. The elections were free, and international observers did not record any serious violations. But the essence of what is happening makes any supporter of democracy shudder. Prabowo is an extremely controversial figure. In the 90s, as a military officer, he was linked to the disappearances of activists and human rights violations in East Timor. Then his career came to an abrupt end, and he was effectively expelled from the army. But a rebranding of his political positions allowed him to return. Prabowo ran for president twice unsuccessfully. The third time was lucky, with the active support of Widodo, who decided to ensure the continuity of his course. The appointment of the president's son as vice president looks like an attempt to create a political dynasty. Widodo once promised that he would not build a family empire. It looks like that was an election promise unfulfilled. Human rights activists are sounding the alarm. The new president's authoritarian tendencies are already evident in the first months of his rule. Tightening control over the media, persecution of critics, and using the state apparatus to suppress the opposition. The paradox is that Prabowo's popularity remains high. Voters are willing to overlook democratic issues for the sake of economic stability and a strong hand, the classic trade-off of freedom for security. The international community has so far reacted with restraint. Indonesia is too important economically and geopolitically to jeopardize relationships because of internal problems. But the warning signs are mounting. The question is how far the new president is willing to go in restricting democratic freedoms, and are Indonesians willing to tolerate this?
Success creates new challenges. 17,000 islands are a logistical nightmare. Connecting the archipelago with infrastructure is a task of pharaonic proportions. The island of Java concentrates more than half of the population and the bulk of the economy. This disproportion creates tension and hinders the development of remote regions. The capital, Jakarta, is slowly sinking. By 2050, the 30 million-strong metropolis could become uninhabitable. Rescue plans require tens of billions of dollars. Environmental problems are growing: deforestation, river pollution, smog over cities. Rapid industrialization does not come without a cost. Corruption, which seemed to have been defeated, is raising its head again. Large projects are becoming a source of enrichment for officials. All these problems could slow down the Indonesian miracle. But for now, the country is successfully coping with most of the challenges. Today, Indonesia is at a crossroads. America offers partnership, but demands a tough stance on China.
China tempts with large-scale investments, but risks making the country dependent. The battle for Indonesia is a battle for the future of Asia. The country has turned geographical accidents into strategic advantages, and its non-aligned policy into a source of investment from all sides. Indonesia holds the keys to trade routes that connect Asia with the rest of the world. Can Jakarta continue to play the role of a skilled diplomat, benefiting from the rivalry between the giants? Or will it have to make a choice? Time will tell. But it is already clear that anyone underestimating this country of 17,000 islands risks losing the geopolitical game of the 21st century. If you found the material interesting, please like and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments, have you heard about the Indonesian economic miracle before?